Japanese pop culture. From Pokemon to Ghost in the Shell, those images are the ones that seem to be the face of the pop culture phenomenon in the United States and in Europe as it spreads around the world. So, just very, very quickly, some of the things you'll encounter in the book, you'll encounter, I think, the only English language interview with Iwatani-san, the inventor of Pac-Man. Talks about how and why he invented Pac-Man. You'll encounter the people who were behind the Pokemon explosion in the United States. People who started Pokemon as a game and then a comic book series before bringing it to the rest of the world. Pokemon is now in over 60 countries worldwide and is an over $25 billion multimedia empire. And if you live in New York, you know that Pikachu now soars above Fifth Avenue on Thanksgiving Day, right next to Snoopy and Bullwinkle and the gang. So that's quite a significant sign of how deeply embedded some of these pop cultural phenomena are now in the United States.
We need more anime characters.
We need more anime characters. Well, they're coming. They're coming. Just a couple of quick things before we go to the panel of one of the reasons that I cite in the book for the sudden surge in popularity in the United States. It is very much a 21st century phenomenon, although I know Pokemon was released in the U.S. in '97. But the real growth that you see in interest and the growth that you see in sales is really much a product of this century. And one of the things you have happening now in the United States is a kind of confluence of two generations. On the one hand, you have a generation who are now in their late 30s through early 50s of Americans and Europeans who encountered Japanese pop culture through older titles such as Tezuka's Astro Boy, such as, I mentioned earlier, Speed Racer, which was on American television, such as Battle of the Planets, which is originally called Gatchaman. Titles such as these, which were shown on American television, appeal to a generation now in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s. Those guys now have power. Those guys and gals, I should say, they now have power in Hollywood and centers of creative production in this country. So, for example, you have Michael Bay, who is the director of Transformers, last summer's release, the Wachowskis, as I mentioned earlier, Imagi Studios out in LA, which is producing Astro Boy and Gatchaman for release in 2009, 2010, DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, etc. You have a generation now in positions of power who remember those titles and have a great fondness for them and a wish to reproduce them. You also have a younger generation, of course, in their late teens and 20s, some of whom were hit by the Pokemon phenomenon. They left it behind, naturally, but they've moved on to other titles. In other words, they were introduced to the style and they wanted more of it. So whether it's Naruto or Gundam or Death Note, those products are now being purchased by people who are gaining purchasing power in their late teens and early 20s. So it's almost like an ideal confluence in a way of generations and their interest in the Japanese pop product. And of course, most exciting, in a sense, if you accept my Mobius strip, media strip theory, is what happens now that generations of folks outside of Japan are starting to and have been producing their own manga, their own anime, their own sometimes brilliant mashup videos on YouTube. The process and the product has become an interactive medium. Certainly one of the reasons that the Japanese pop phenomenon is happening now is that it was interactive from the very beginning. Some of you may know in Japan there's a whole community of fan artists called doujinshi, in Japanese, doujinshika technically, who actually create their own fan versions of their favorite manga, often mixing up characters from different manga that they like and putting them in strange scenarios. And then reselling them in specific shops that tailor to fan artists.